The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the Future of Work, implementing a hybrid working model. My name is Stephen Huerta, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workify, an all-in-one employee feedback platform. Today is the second of 4 fireside chats that will examine the topic that's a huge area of focus right now, returning to office. Over the last month, we've spent a lot of time working with our clients on analyzing data, exploring how employees feel about this topic. And today we have a great guest that I have a ton of respect for that's led his organization through this very difficult process of determining what the future of work looks like for his business. His company has 180 employees that sit across 13 locations, 6 states, and 3 countries. I'll introduce him shortly, but first, let's take a quick look at our discussion topics. As you know, if you've joined previous webinars, I like to set a little bit of context around the discussion. And in our first episode, we looked at some of the numbers in terms of the US economy. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but the reality is that the US economy has reopened for business. And the deeper that we get into this process of determining what business as usual will look like, we continue to be confronted with spikes in COVID-19 in certain states, a growing view that we're going to have another phase of this in the fall. And this is all complicated the effort to establish a firm plan. On the flip side, employees remain concerned about their safety. And our data continues to support that 2/3 of American workers feel uncomfortable about returning to the office. And more than 50% don't expect to return to the office before the fall. And this has actually been pushed out. Earlier it was August, and now we're seeing that 50% don't expect to be in the office until the fall. So the question is, how do you plan a return to work strategy when your employee feedback is pointing to a desire for a hybrid model, which means, from our perspective, part remote and part office, that takes into consideration employee fears and concerns? And today we're going to look at exactly how you can address this question head on, how you can use data to inform the decisions your leadership team is making, how you can include your employees in this process. The key theme for today is inclusion. How can you include your employees in the conversation and still do what's right for your business? Quick reminder, my colleague CJ will be monitoring our chat line, so please remember to send your questions to us throughout the conversation. Again, we're going to try to spend 40 minutes on the discussion and open up the final 20 minutes for a Q&A dialogue. So please do hit us up with your questions. So without further ado, let me introduce the guest for today. Joining us for this second fireside chat is Marsh Lavenue, President and CEO of INTERA. Prior to becoming CEO in 2008, Marsh served at various levels of the organization. And since assuming the role of CEO, he's grown the business 7x. He's done that through organic growth and 3 acquisitions that he has integrated into the strong culture at INTERA, as well as expanding greatly the service lines that INTERA is in. And I'll let him explain that given the technical nature of their business. So today we have a leader that I admire. I have a ton of respect for Marsh. In full disclosure, Marsh and INTERA are a client of Workify, and I've had the great fortune to present at 2 year-end manager offsites for Marsh and his team. And his commitment to his shareholders and employees becomes totally clear when you meet his people. Whether it's the leadership team, junior managers, or individual contributors, they all have positive things to say about Marsh. And from my perspective, it comes down to his approach as a leader and how he runs his business. So I'm thrilled to have him here today to share how he's worked through these truly unprecedented times. Welcome, Marsh. How have you been?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Just a correction, please. I have a great team that I work with, so I wasn't the leading all the growth. I hire well. Let me just leave it at that, okay?
Great point.
And thank you for having us, though.
Thank you for being here. Before we jump into the discussion, I thought it would be helpful. I noticeably skipped the technical description of your company.
Okay.
You guys do some really interesting work, but I won't do it justice. So can you just give us a quick overview of your business?
You bet. Yeah, INTERA is a 45-year-old engineering and consulting company. The best way to describe us is that we are a geoscience and engineering firm. In today's vernacular, you would say that we're a data analytics company. So we develop and apply data analytics for problems related to water supply, environmental cleanup. In fact, we're involved in the largest cleanup on the globe right now, which is in Washington State. And we work on projects, from Australia to Kazakhstan. So it's really focused on helping our clients through our data analytics manage risks that they face with either environmental or water supply or infrastructure decisions.
Fascinating. It really is fascinating work. I wish we had more time to get into some of the details. I mentioned earlier the tremendous growth that the company's gone through under your leadership and the hard work of the team. What over that period of time, what's been the closest situation you've seen to what we're experiencing with COVID-19?
That's a great question. I was thinking about this. From the travel restriction, of course, when we have to go back to 9/11, that was, it essentially shut travel down for a long time. But from an economic perspective, of course, the financial crisis in 2008, where the economy, of course, was suffering greatly for a number of years. Those two events, I think, have helped us navigate some of the potential and, the uncertainties that we see in front of us. But I know we're going to talk more about how, back in 2001, we didn't have Zoom. So today, I think the business community is much more equipped to respond and pivot to these kinds of situations.
Yeah, agreed. It's been pretty phenomenal working and hearing the stories from all of our clients in terms of how they've been able to overcome some of the obstacles. And you're right. We are going to talk a lot about this, and I really can't wait to get into the details. Should we go ahead and jump into the conversation?
Absolutely, sir.
All right, let's
Absolutely.
do it.
Thank you.
Let's do it. Well, we typically start with a macro trend, Marsh. And today's trend is, the statement, we are redefining the future of work. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to reimagine how we do business. There are some leaders that I talk to who are more pessimistic about the current situation and the changes that are happening. Others are leaning into the change and finding business opportunities in the midst of the chaos. I guess, what is your reaction to this statement?
Right. It's well stated. I think for us, the current situation, like all companies, has forced us to do business differently.
Yep.
And to open our minds and our consideration, our processes open to other areas of connection, such as the webinar that we're having today, the chat meetings that we do online. And at first, of course, I wasn't sure how our team would respond to it. We were traditionally a work in the office. Every employee has their own 10 by 10 or slightly larger separate office for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we, I guess conceptually, we've always looked at other consulting companies that have a distributed workforce as a lifestyle company,
mm-hmm.
which is, we would never be a lifestyle company, but in fact, I think maybe they had it right. So we've been dragged to this new paradigm.
Yep.
And guess what? It's actually great. It's actually great. So I'll tell you a little bit more about why I think our employees think it's great. But it has forced us to take a step back and look at, okay, was it really necessary for me to get on a plane, travel all day, have a 1 hour meeting that we're now having over the web? Everything is working well. So it is a once in a lifetime opportunity for business owners and managers to rethink what is really the acceptable way to show up in your work, and whether it's your home office or an office. That really is I think the consideration that most business owners are going through right now.
Yeah, and I know that you are in a lot of CEO groups, a lot of forums, and you have an extensive network. What do you think other CEOs and leaders are sharing your sentiment?
Great question. I think, it does, of course, vary depending on the type of business you're in. If you're a data-centric company like INTERA, enables that to occur much more readily than, for example, hospitality. As you know, my oldest son is Justin owns the Roosevelt Room down in downtown Austin, cocktail bar, so he's in the hospitality business, and he hasn't opened since March. Doesn't plan to open for a little while until things are really safe to do so.
Yeah.
By contrast, I have a younger son who's a CPA in Denver named Colin, and he works for a company called Workiva, and they took the access. They deactivated their access card, so he couldn't get into the office if he tried to. So they've been working from home. So I'm looking at how their prospective companies are and so there is some variability on how business owners can and should respond to this situation.
One of the things
One
of the things that we've seen is that trust plays a pretty key factor into all of this, and how is that? What's your view on that?
That's what it comes down to. I mean, if you do have a business where it's available to work from home and not skip a beat, the question then comes down to trust, as you well noted. What kind of trust-based culture is it? A management overseeing the workforce through a untrustful lens? That's not the company we are. We're a high trust, highly engaged group. Our team are self-starters. I don't have any concerns or miss schedules or go over budget on things related to the fact that we're working from home. In fact, the data supports that. So a little bit later on, I'll tell you about some of the data that we've gotten and some of the key metrics that I watch along the way. But defining the future of work for us, as I mentioned, we started using Skype for Business and Zoom much more readily. And when I realized, the point I realized which we actually had sunk in and we'd adapted to it, was when all my engineers and scientists started turning their monitors on. Now, when that happened, I was like, okay, I think people are getting comfortable now, and they actually want to see someone's face and engage in a personal way.
And I'm guessing that was a journey, Marsh. Can you share a little bit about how you and the team worked through the processing to determine what was right for INTERA?
Right. So, at the beginning, I'd say back in the beginning, in February, middle of February, when it was clear the pandemic was in the U.S., I asked our back office, each of our offices, to see what kind of capacity do we have for people if we send everybody home. Are we ready for that? And so our IT team, headed by David Satchel, did a great job of reacting and assessing what kind of pipelines do we have into the office. He identified a few bottlenecks, so we fixed those. And so we knew we were ready, and it was a matter of one by one, we had offices start to move their staff home. And I think it was Friday, and I told everyone that we were heading home next week to get their things on Monday. But after Monday, which would have been the 16th, we were closing the offices. What I wound up doing at that point, Steve, was having weekly town halls to ask for questions to be sent to me prior to the town hall. The first town hall we had was all the questions were about, are there going to be layoffs? And so right out of the gate, I told our staff there are not going to be layoffs. We have a strong business, and we could absorb the potential losing business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our 180 people, 45-year-old company, we're a great team, and I didn't want to see this pandemic cause us to lose any of our key members. from our admins, staff, office managers, all the way to our executive team. Everybody has been kept on board.
And so it sounds like your first focus was just easing some of the anxieties and the core fears around, like, am I going to have a job?
That's exactly right. So, and then as that fear became mitigated, we wound up moving into other concerns that our employees had. As you know, we did a survey at the 1st of April to see how, after a month of working from home, I sent out a Workify survey and got some great feedback that, in fact, the first month was clearly a month of transition. And you know, if you're used to work in a relatively large office, that dynamic that you have as a team is part of, you know, what's fun to come to work. And so that was missing. So we had to replace the web-based meetings with groups, individual groups, but also as a company. So we do a town hall every Wednesday afternoon. And those themes have changed over each week. We'll include a little bit about what's going on with COVID and where we are with our office openings, which is we're not opening. Each week we're not opening. I just let people know, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but they've been, I think the communication is the key for relieving anxiety and making sure people have what they need to get their work done.
And so it sounds like things ran pretty smoothly. So did you feel like it was a pretty straightforward decision for INTERA in terms of exploring a hybrid model going forward?
Yes, you know, I actually I didn't know exactly how our team would react to working from home, but as people have gotten used to it and are, you know, the workspace at their homes, and I'd say most of the employees have a comfortable workspace. Now, some have indicated through the surveys that they don't, and they'd like to get back to the office whenever it's safe to do so. Mm-hmm. So we've been, you know, taking in that kind of information and trying to act on it. Long-term decisions we make regarding how many people can be back in the office, even though we're officially closed. There are a couple that do come into the office because they really have to have that infrastructure to do their work. Some of our engineering designers, for example. But it's been relatively easy, Stephen. I've been real happy. I've been real happy with the results.
Good. And so, are there any other ways that this situation has impacted the way you do business outside of just, you know, the way you work?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So two points I'd like to make. One is I was pleasantly surprised that by the end of April, we had a little bit of a transition. You can see the transition impact. Of course, we sell time as a consulting company, but I saw a little bit of an impact as we were migrating to the home office in March. But April was a very strong month for us in terms of our billable hours. And May was stronger. And so today we're ahead of plan and more profitable actually than we were predicting as of from our January budgeting process. So
wait, what?
Through Q2,
sorry, Marsh, slow down. So you're saying that you are more profitable given some of the changes that you guys have made. What do you think drove that?
Well, interestingly enough, our utilization, the amount of time our staff was billing to clients actually increased in their home office than in the office. And so I think my guess is that there's probably more time and focus on getting work done at your home office. And it may be, of course, the lack of a commute gives people more time to sit down and they don't have that commitment to, but I think also, I mean, our travel expenses are nil or zero, and our office expenses are low. Our biggest cost is our labor. And so if labor is more deployed on projects, we have less indirect costs on labor. And so that affects our bottom line. So we're pretty much on plan for revenue. we're lower on expenses and therefore we're higher on profits. We're running about 7% higher on profits.
Wow, that's
so, that's good. I mean, I'm from Arkansas, but I do know that that's a good thing.
yeah. And what about the flip side? Like, what were there negative things that that you had to quickly adjust to in terms of the way that you were working, needing to shift your labor around or your people into just mixing things up, I guess.
Yes, I think the some of the a few of the negatives that I think I touched on just earlier, because some of the staff are fresh out of school, they're working basically at their kitchen table. They don't have a dedicated and therefore the home environment is not well suited to working unless you're eating at your table while you have your computer set up. It's a little bit of a infrastructure challenge for some of our staff, and I completely understand that. I wound up downstairs into our basement, and my wife was kind enough to let me take over this area. She hasn't charged me rent yet, so I think that's part of it. But let's be clear, the commute in Austin, I mean, no one's commuting, so that's a big win for our staff. I mean, it's to an hour to get to the office, and just the work-life balance. I mean, I can tell you that our staff seem to be a lot happier with the way things are working from home. And that comes through in some of the recent surveys we've done.
Interesting. Well, I think there's more that we could dig into there, but time is of the essence. So let's move on to the next discussion point. And really the first discussion point I want to dig into is, this statement, take your time in finding your future of work or sprint to the new normal. And I think as leaders, there's a tendency to want to quickly get back into business as usual, and to try to define a new sense of normalcy and want to, and provide that kind of structure and predictability to employees. But that clearly has been a struggle with COVID-19. And so, what's your view on this discussion point?
We have really two time frames, right? We have today until a vaccine. I'll set out as one scenario. And then, of course, post-vaccine, long-term.
Mm-hmm.
And so our approach has been to take it very slow. Given the fact that we're highly productive at home, we're meeting our numbers, we're for our team as a whole. We're not in any hurry to storm back into the brick and mortar office. So we're taking our time. And I think each town hall, we reinforce every few weeks, people see the news. And of course, some of the states, as you noted, are reopening. The natural question is, what's quote unquote management going to do regarding, demanding us come back to the office? And we reassure them each week there's no plans to come back to the office. We're going to stay put. We'll return when we believe it's safe to return. To that, we have really the short-term strategy, which is, as I mentioned, to stay home. The long-term strategy, okay, what does a hybrid model look like for INTERA over the long term? And for us, the mix between the office and the home is going to be our policy manual up in Word, and I'm working through updating some of the policy discussion on what core hours are and how many days a week one might consider being core in our company. So we're really rethinking the long term along with responding to the short term.
And so it sounds like you're taking a phased approach. And how have you engaged your employees in getting their view on that?
Great question. So we're of course, you and I work together on the pulse surveys and engagement surveys that Workify provides, and so our team as well is highly experienced in taking surveys. And I think we decided it would be important for us to do, as I mentioned, the April survey. How are things going at home? And then we just recently did a survey 2 weeks ago with your help on how many days of the week would you like to work in the office? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Under 3 different scenarios. Scenario 1 would be at the point where we decide that it's safe to open up the offices to 25% capacity. That's one scenario. So we got feedback on our staff on what they would view. And to your point, you said 2/3 of the employees of our employees are concerned about going back to the office. So about 80%, 85%, I think in the short term are like, we're just fine where we are, which I completely understand. Number 2 scenario was 50% capacity. Are you interested? How many days of the week would you be interested in working in the office? And what is, of course, the long term, as I mentioned to you, post-vaccine. And so what we found was that the data, I believe actually the numbers were 88% no office right now. It dropped to 80, 85, 83% at 50% capacity. And then long term, it was around of the staff would like to have a hybrid model. And so the feedback I got was that A, hybrid model is here to stay. B, it gave us the analytics on what days of the week are generally preferred by the staff to come to the office.
Yeah,
and hey,
go ahead.
Just a new, who wants to work on Friday at the office? So that one I probably could have answered.
Yeah, and I think you had an overwhelming 95% of participation, and so clearly there was employees really wanted to provide their feedback on the future plan. And so, question, just kind of shifting things around a little bit, why do you think this is such a difficult problem for companies and leaders? Because I mean, you guys were at the forefront with making change. You deployed surveys. You did not hesitate. But that hasn't been the case. And so why do you think it has been such a difficult problem for companies to get their arms around?
Well, I think if there's, first and foremost, if you don't have a way to pulse your employees effectively and with some with a reasonable set of analytics that enable you to understand really what the data is telling you, that could be problem number 1. But as you know, we're a big believer in pulse surveys and diving deep into the analytics to understand what really is happening with the way our employees are showing up to work and how they're engaged. But I think number 1 is the feedback technology that some companies may or may not have access to.
Good point.
But I think the other point is getting back to hospitality is that they're surviving, they're fighting to survive. And of course, a lot of bars and restaurants have gone out of business across the country, large companies that own many locations of bars and restaurants, if they're even still open to this day. So, I don't want to be presumptuous enough to say I know what's best for other types of companies in other markets, but for an engineering consulting firm that I know that industry pretty well, and to the degree that you have staff that go out into the field and take measurements, which we also have, about 20%, I'd say 15% of our staff have been impacted in our workflow. So we were not able to go out and drill sample boreholes or sample wells or that we have to do for our clients out in the field. And that occurred during the period where the states were shut down. Now that they're reopening, our field teams are going out into the field, but we put in place best practices for them to manage through social distancing and some of the hygiene, of course, that take separate cars to a location if the two are going. If we can get by with just one doing the sampling event, then that is preferred. But you know, for some companies that work out in the field predominantly, the good news, of course, it's outside. That's helpful, but this is in going to about their daily work. I think that that's also something that could lead to them getting back to some kind of new normal.
Got it.
You know, again, trying to understand some of the other businesses that are very effective at home, and that's the one area I was most concerned about. But our back office hasn't missed a beat, so I've been very pleased about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I in the early days of this, we thought that there might be, and we talked about this, that there might be a size component that the bigger you are, the more challenging of a situation this would be to pivot. But we found that there's some really massive companies that are working through this quickly, and so it's not a function of size. And in some instances, there are exceptions, not even industry or the business you're in. But it really comes down to, again, we talked earlier about trust and how the comfort level in your employees that they're really working. And so really quickly before we move to the next discussion point, were there any surprises or blind spots as you worked through your scenario planning and your phasing out?
Well, for sure, I think one of the blind spots we had initially was, are we prepared from an IT infrastructure perspective? And we weren't. And so we had to do work, as I mentioned in February, to get our other blind spots. That's a great question, Stephen. I can't think of any right off the gate. We've learned a lot. We've responded. I think, as I mentioned, the enhanced use of, I think, the biggest advancement in just the way we work with each other. I mean, we'd had Skype for business for years, and almost inevitably it would just be an audio call. You get a Skype, no human, just a voice from somewhere. Eye-to-eye contact, but I think that's been really cool. I've enjoyed it, and so we're doing a lot of companies. We're doing happy hours, and we do technical presentations. So I think the blind spot was maybe that, yes, this technology is to use it, and we're getting used to it, and we like it. So that's a good takeaway.
Great. Well, final discussion point. Again, this is more of a statement that I would love to get your opinion on, and that is, if you nail this, like this, determining the new future of work for your business, you'll be able to strengthen your culture and improve business results over the long run. In the short to midterm, do you think it's possible to actually strengthen culture and improve the employee experience?
Well, let me just say that, one of the mantras we have, one of our guiding principles is stewardship. In fact, in this book called The Culture Book that was put out by some of the group that organized a Culturati conference, and INTERA was honored to be included in that book. And really the reason why we were included was this concept of stewardship, making an asset that you're entrusted with better and properly managed. So for us, because we're not a heavy, we don't have much inventory per se, we don't sell hardware, we're a labor force, and therefore our labor are our assets. Mm-hmm. And so the stewardship for us, and the way we've responded to this crisis, really, when you're in these moments of what could be panic and high uncertainty, get back the guiding principles you have. our staff understand that they are our assets and that we are going to protect them. That has strengthened. So in essence, it's, walking the talk when things get really dicey and uncertain. I think the response that our management team, stay put, be calm. We're not laying anyone off. We're going to work through this together. Even if we go through 2020 and we don't make a single dime of profit, and we might even experience some loss if we hold on to everybody. I just think it was the right message to send. Fortunately, we have been able to withstand some of these pressures because we know it's going to turn around. In 2008, when the world was burning, we had this mix that we have between our federal clients, state and local clients, and private sector clients enables us, if one market sector is in usually another one is surging. For example, in 2008, we won a big federal contract up at the Hanford site to clean up, and that we just pivoted a lot of our staff that were affected by the 2008 economic situation to the federal work, and we had one of our highest growth periods ever from 2008 to 2012, right as in poor shape for a lot of the businesses. We were fortunate enough to have that client mix that enabled us to withstand and pivot accordingly. I think this will be the same. As I mentioned, we haven't seen much of an impact other than our field teams, as I mentioned.
Yep.
But clearly our oil and gas work has gone down. Mining, oil and gas is pretty much done. We were supporting some of the operations and water operations in West Texas. So, but we've been, we've held staff, even if they don't have anything to do, we have them do some training, and we're waiting for them to be deployed onto other projects. But I think that nailing this, walking the talk, is going to mean your company or your comp is going to take a hit in the long run. If you have the long-term view, I think if you do the right thing according to your business, you'll come out of this stronger.
In specific to the culture piece, this notion of strengthening culture, have there been any situations or opportunities at INTERA for there to be a culture building scenario or situation that is unique to COVID-19?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I have quarterly staff meetings, so I would get them to talk about the results of our quarter, and we've recognized performance of our team, But the weekly town halls, we've I've searched for content. How am I going to make these interesting? Clearly, you can do a COVID. We hear from one of our team members on a project, but 2 weeks ago I said, maybe why don't we spice this up a little bit? And it turns out that I have a really close friend in Austin who's a singer-songwriter. His name's Tommy Siragusa. He has this great band called The Ponds, and he sent me a song he wrote as he was sequestered in Austin, nicely on the other side. And it was probably about 2 months ago when he sent it to me. I said, you know what? We're going to have Tommy do this live performance.
Nice.
And I can tell you, I don't know how it was received. I got some feedback from some of the team that, just a beautiful song. That element of humanity, I think, is making some of the town halls more than just a staff meeting or an information exchange. We're trying to make them a wellness component to the meeting, right? And so now I end all my staff meetings with my slide says, "I'll see you on the other side."
Nice. I love it.
You got to mix it up.
You do have
Otherwise, my attendance will drop like a rock.
And on that note, in terms of things going the way
our staff meetings aren't trending yet, Stephen.
Good. But on the kind of using that as a segue in terms of things not playing out the way you would hope. For those that fail at maintaining their culture, during this period or post COVID-19, what do you think will be the downfall for those companies?
Yeah, I think you're going to see attrition. I think there's an opportunity for company to really solidify that commitment that we're in this together. And I think if that we're not in this together, then I think what you've done is set in motion an exit by some of the employees who could find other places to go when the timing is right. I mean, that's the way. Every business is slightly different. Every business owner has to make the tough choices they have to make to keep the business open, right? To keep the business alive. And there are some tough choices going around in the business community, of course. Layoffs you hear about all over the place. So I feel for suggest otherwise, because if I was running a business where I had to have people at a location to service a B2C type business, those are tough choices. But for those who can adopt a hybrid model and walk the talk, staff to stay as safe as possible while also maintaining a certain core group at the office as necessary, then I think that's something each business owner should take a hard look at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And earlier, Marsh, you brought up this core value or driving principle of stewardship, and I love that. And I think to add on to what you shared, I think if there isn't a stewardship for the well-being of the workforce at the highest levels, at the CEO level down to the C-suite, down to senior managers, then there are going to be problems. And I think that there's a level of scrutiny right now by employees, and they'll see that to use your words, that companies are choosing the short term over the long term. And I think that disconnect contributes to the attrition. It contributes to the erosion of your culture, and that's when, in my mind, those are the companies that are really going to struggle in getting their businesses back on track. So
I agree.
And I also, one of the things that I'm taking from what you shared that I agree with completely is that the winners will be the companies that choose to listen to their employees and also choose the well-being of their people.
Right.
So
I agree.
With that said, I said we would have 40 minutes of discussion. We're about 41 minutes into the conversation. CJ, what are some of the questions we're getting from the audience?
I'm looking right now, and there are some questions coming in. It looks like the first one that we have here is, this question looks like it's, how are you keeping your employees engaged during this transfer to the hybrid model?
Great question. I've asked my management team from the kind of the division managers down to the group level, i.e. the kind of level 1 managers to have a couple of meetings a week, maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we're really driving engagement by one-on-ones with your staff. Number 2, group meetings. As I mentioned, communication is really right now the key to keep employees engaged and to mitigate some of the loneliness that occurs when you're working by yourself. I mean, well, obviously a fair portion of our staff, particularly younger staff, are single. In fact, we've hired about 8 new employees since COVID, since we left for our homes. And so I've been telling I call our new employees on their first day of business, say, welcome to INTERA. Welcome. It's a very weird time, I know. Usually everyone else has showed up at the office and on their first day, but here we are. And I've been very happy to say that they've been getting on their first day a lot of communication from our team around the country. So I think engagement is driven by communication and keeping the work exciting and the connections with people real ones.
For sure, for sure. Looks like we have another question that's in right now, and looks like this question says, how are you using employee feedback to really shape your future work strategy?
Okay, thank you, CJ. Yeah, as I mentioned, if I can plug Workify, we're big believers in the Workify technology, and so we do a lot of surveying throughout the year. And what's been very helpful is to have that possibility out there as we go through the decisions that we have to make in a real-time framework. So we've done it since we left for home. And as I mentioned just recently, the survey 2 weeks ago, that's for us, gives us the feedback and analytics for us to make the decisions for short-term and long-term, as I mentioned earlier.
Great. It looks like we have one more here, and it looks like, what are some other examples of how it looks like it's for both Workify and INTERA? How are you guys embracing this hybrid work model? What are some other examples of how you're doing that?
Stephen, do you want me to handle the Workify approach?
Yeah.
After you, sir. What are you doing? What's Workify doing?
Well, the hybrid work model for us, we made as a SaaS software company, we made a pretty quick decision that we were moving to 100% remote working. It was about 2 weeks in that we saw, and it was very similar, Marsh, to the experience that you had, that our engineering teams were actually working at a higher level of velocity and capacity. Part of that was that some of the conversations that we were having in the office, and our engineers they had a preference to be in the office together. That once we moved to remote, it required a higher level of communication, and we have our own set of communication tools. But what we found was the informal asynchronous communication improved. And so from an engineering standpoint, it was a no-brainer. From a sales standpoint, I think our salespeople were used to having multiple monitors, and the whole the standard kind of account executives set up at on the floor, and so we opened up the office so that they could go get any hardware they needed, and they quickly found like, hey, this is working out great from a client success perspective, or account customer support perspective. It was a very, very seamless process as well. And so within a couple of weeks, just seeing how we were performing, we made the decision to cancel our lease. And there were there were costs associated with that, but we went all in. And the point about well-being is that we did have an employee situation in which there is one of our employees, without any sort of vaccine in place, a very senior employee of ours, they won't be able to come back to the office. And with knowing what that meant to him, what he means to the company, it just became a no-brainer. And so we very quickly, decided we're going to be a remote working company. I think that was easy for us to make. Again, given that we're a software company, there are a lot of comps for, if anyone out there is considering it. There are companies like Envision, Zapier that already had embraced a remote working model. And so there's a lot of stuff that's been published and is accessible on LinkedIn and online that made it easy for us to do that. But yeah, so that's the Workify story.
Very cool. Yeah. So you all canceled your lease even. That's
we went all in.
You're all in, man.
You know me, Marsh, pretty well.
Yes, absolutely.
We went all in.
That's cool. It's interestingly enough, in January, we signed a 10-year lease on a beautiful building in Albuquerque. We have large offices in Austin, Albuquerque, in the Tri-Cities in Washington State. And so all three of our large offices are the one in Albuquerque is going to be really beautiful, top floor, mountain view. So I guess at this point, we're going to make obviously the best use of our offices we have. They're going to be nice places to come to work. So I think people will still want to come to work and clearly engage with their fellow teammate.
Yeah, what we're finding, Marsh, is in our client data and where our clients are heading. And we talked a little bit about this in the prior session. If anyone's interested in learning more about what I'm about to share, you can gain access to the recording of episode 1 on our website. But we are finding that office space is going to be dedicated to very specific types of business. Earlier, you mentioned that, why would I jump in my car, drive an hour to get to an office to then, get distracted by all the things and do work that I actually could do very easily from home. And the notion of some of the older generations, and millennials have been asking for this for more than a decade. And older generations like myself and the boomers, the view has been, we can't, remote working doesn't work. You're not actually getting the things done. Well, guess what? We were wrong. You can, because we all had to do it. And so what we're seeing is that the office is going to be used for very specific types of collaboration. And again, there's ways you can get feedback from your employees, and we can share, if you're interested, share best practices with how some of the clients that we're working with are getting this data. But things like cross-functional team collaboration on specific projects, as an engineering, or coming together as a sales team, to submit, to get in a war room, to talk through, the details of how you're going to respond and the tactics on a really, really big bid or deal. Those are the things, and that's going to vary company by company, but those are the things where there is a magic that happens in the office. And so we are big believers, and we'll do that. We're just going to use space, co-working space or some sort of space for us to have those moments together. But I think as we get further through this, that will become clear, Marsh, what those moments that matter, what those are for INTERA. But that's the trend that we're seeing emerging.
That's a good point. One last thing, there is a point I forgot to make, I'd like to make about our clients. We probably put out 100 proposals a year, bids for various state agencies or federal agencies or private sector clients. And over the last few months, typically you get shortlisted on a bid, and then you'll have an interview, an in-person interview. Well, these in-person interviews have gone to web interviews, and we've been winning these web interviews projects, and I'm just really thrilled. 2 weeks ago we won a really important key strategic win for Denver Water, one of the principal utilities, water utilities up here in Colorado, and it was a highly competitive process, and our team was an underdog, and we pulled it off. I was really proud of them. I know, just really proud, and kudos to them. But the point is that the clients are also agencies, other companies are also getting used to having the web as the media to conduct these types of interviews and meetings. And but I agree with you. I think the office is here to stay in some kind of higher level purpose, meetings, brainstorming, project management, updates, those kinds of things. But I think if you can do your work, I mean, if you travel in an office and you really are working for the most part on a solo task for some period of time, you can do that at home.
We got some more questions rolling in, Marsh, so I'm going to keep on it. We have a question: how can we get a copy of the slides? We will send, if you're interested, we're happy to share the slides. We'll also be issuing a recording of this video and can send all these materials out, as well as any additional kind of materials that you may want from Marsh, we would be happy to share with you the pulse survey that we did with Marsh's blessing, of course, that we did for INTERA on that helped them plan out and phase out their return to office. So we'll get back to you on that for the person who asked. I have another kind of statement and question here. This is inspiring. Marsh is inspiring. How did he come to realize that he needed Workify?
Oh, that's a great question. In fact, it's funny, Steve. I was thinking about this yesterday. Steve and I met at a conference in Austin called Culturati. It's a one-day event organized in Austin to focus on the best practices of corporate culture. And one of the breakout sessions, Stephen did a Workify presentation. That's where we met. And we had been doing surveys using Excel spreadsheets and paper. How do you feel about? And they were okay, but they didn't give me really insight into how things are working at various levels of the company. And so when I saw the Workify suite of products, I said, I got to have that. And so I was one of the, I don't know, what's it been, 4 or 5 years, Stephen, we've been working together. So, and it's just really provided us a lot of great data. And it was eye-opening to, sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for, but you see the good and the bad. And so I was like, well, this is great. This really needs to improve. It gave us it helped us identify areas of excellence and pockets of the opposite that we really needed to work on. And that included both, helping managers do a better job of communicating, engaging, and recognizing staff for jobs well done. And then as I got into Culturati each year, again, this has been, I think, the 4th year, the difference between, the secret sauce that you can generate by having a strong corporate culture is, I'm just a big believer in it. And I think as we've adopted and engaged more and more regarding the type of intentional culture we want to have, it's based on a set of core values that we all agree are important, and behaviors that stem from those. It's just helped us identify what is and what's not okay. So today we have over the last 5 years, we've developed a very highly engaged, very friendly, trust-based culture. And our attrition rate is 1/5 of what our peers are in the engineering consulting industry. We run about 2% in the engineering industry. It's about 11 or 12%. So you're saying, Marsh, that's 1/6, not 1/5. So are you really good with math or not? Okay, so we're 1/6 below the industry average. And I'm very proud of that, but we really double down, and that's my job as this chief steward to make sure that our work environment and our engagement on a day-to-day basis is optimal given our core values.
A couple of final questions, and we're going to close this off. Unfortunately, we're not going to get through all of them. Any thoughts on how to onboard new employees remotely and make them part of the company culture? You mentioned a direct phone call from you to them. Any other topics? Thoughts or suggestions?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we did a few years ago to double down on our culture, we were growing quite a bit, and I realized that a lot of the new staff, we didn't have hey, here's our culture document, or they kind of were picking it up in the hallways and just by watching people interact. And then I decided we were going to put together a one-day onboarding course called INTERA 101. And so it's 5 modules. It talks about the business consulting model, talks about customer service, but the first quarter of a couple of hours is about our company history and our culture, and what and why we have this concept of stewardship that's guiding the way we interact with one another, the way we run our business. And so last town hall, I announced to the 8 or so new employees that we've hired this year that I was hoping to do INTERA 101 with them in person, in the fall, but I don't see that happening. So we're going to go ahead and do our INTERA 101 with them via web. and that will bring them into this knowledge base that we really want everyone to have. So everybody in the company took it, even our 30-year tenured employees, who in fact some of whom hired me back in the day. We had everybody go through INTERA 101 and share their stories about the company culture and how important it is to take care of our employees, our environment, and our clients and companies. So that's one thing we're doing. We're deploying INTERA 101 via the web.
And that's it for time, guys. I know there are questions around things like impact to employee benefits and compensation. There are more questions around use of future office space, and we will share all these questions and get some responses to Marsh on what's happening as a follow-up. And like I said, if you would like to get more information, let us know. We will be providing a recording of this so you can revisit it. And I just wanted to thank everyone again. We'll be doing our 3rd episode in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for the details on that. And Marsh, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight having you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.